Good morning. I'm Melissa Milsdick. I work for the college and I'm also an alum. I'll just be providing some Zoom tech support today to our wonderful faculty and student panelists. So thank you for joining us for this virtual Accepted Students Day, talking about what's a div, that special word we use at Hampshire for our academic progress. And I want to go over just a couple of technical notes from folks. I would love it if you are willing to turn on your video, and then we can all sort of see each other and wave hello. Even though we can't be together in person, we can be a little more connected that way. If you would like to ask a question, we're going to have two sets of faculty and students talk about their divisional work. And then if you want to ask a question, there's two ways you can do it. You can use the raise hand button, which if you go to the bottom of your screen, you'll see something that says participants. You click on that, and then a little window pops up at the bottom of which is a little blue, well, mine is blue, raise hand. So you can use that, or you can type in the chat box questions or comments. And then I know our panelists want to have just a discussion too, so you could also physically raise your hand to say you have a question and ask it verbally would be great. And if anybody has any technical questions or issues, feel free to message me in the chat. Okay, I will turn it over to Jason.
Great, thank you, Melissa. So I'm Jason Torr. I'm a professor of microbiology at Hampshire. I can go on and on about all the things I teach. If you're curious, I think there's a lot of time for questions. My first sort of role this morning is to talk a little bit about the divisional system in just a few minutes. The divisional system takes a lot more than just a few minutes. So I hope you have a lot of questions. We have a really interesting academic program. It's very unique, it's exciting, and it's very student-centered. So I'm going to talk a little bit about it. If it doesn't quite make sense, if you have a lot of questions, I think we'll have a lot of time for that, okay? So when students arrive in the fall, they are Division I students. We have 3 divisions, Division I, II, and III. And their first year, their entire first year, they're considered Division I students. We have a new a modified program for Division I that we're starting in the fall. It's really interesting and exciting. We've spent a little over the last year working on this new program, or this modification to how we do Division I. And we have these new transdisciplinary Division I seminars. So all students in their first year will take 2 transdisciplinary seminars. These are taught with teams of faculty across multiple disciplines. And the students will do one in the fall, another one in the spring. The remainder of their first year is 5 electives, really whatever the students are interested in. We tend to encourage students to think broadly, to explore areas that they think they're interested in, but also areas that maybe they're not so sure about, but that they want to learn a little bit more about, for instance. In addition to that, students in their first year engage in something we call CEL1, or community engaged learning. This is where students learn to work collaboratively, they talk across differences, learn to engage in community, learn more about Hampshire College, really. And throughout this whole first year, students have an advisor that they meet with regularly and helps guide them in this process. After that first year, students go into Division II, and this Division II makes up their second and their third years at Hampshire College. And this is really the self-designed concentration. Students decide every aspect of their curriculum in consultation with faculty. So there's 2 faculty members and 1 student on what we call a committee. And this is really focused around the students' questions, their interests. Again, it's like, you know, for some, you could call it a major. We tend not to call it that so much as a student's concentration. It tends to be made up not only of courses, but also special projects, independent studies, internships, field study abroad, all sorts of things. And the student has a contract And it's not sort of in the classic sense of a contract where, you know, it's written in stone. This is more of a document that it tends to evolve with time, but it's a place where students articulate their goals and their interests and what they want to get out of Division II. And it's more of a guiding and planning document that faculty and students use in thinking about the courses students are doing or their activities and making sure they're sort of on a path or their plan. Again, it does change from time to time, and that's a very natural part of Division II. Sometimes Division II is very multidisciplinary. It really depends on the student. Sometimes it's much more focused. But it ends with a portfolio of all the students' work. We have a final Division II meeting and sort of go through the portfolio review, and the students are given the opportunity to reflect on those, you know, past 2 years, which is really an important part of the learning. And then after that, so ideally Division II really prepares students for Division III. And Division III is where, you know, this is where students really begin to change the world, okay? This is where books are born. This is where new startups, new ideas, this is where nonprofits really come into the students' thinking, all kinds of really great scientific discoveries. This is a student-designed, year-long project. Okay, it's an advanced, sort of an advanced independent study. Okay, it takes up a majority of the students' time. In fact, in the fourth year, students are only asked to complete 2 other sort of advanced educational activities. Those might be 2 classes, might be a class in TA, it could be an internship, but really the majority of the students' time is spent working on the Division III. And we have some really, I don't know all the students we have with us today. I work with Ethan, but I'm excited to hear about these Division IIIs. Because that's really the exciting part and interesting part of what the students do before they leave Hampshire, and really this just sort of sets them off. And so I'm going to stop mumbling there and turn it over to the students. I think my job now is to really just turn it over to students to introduce themselves. I don't know if we have an order in which we're going. But somebody want to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, I can start unless Kim, you have something to say?
Sorry, I
Yeah,
was muted. No,
yes.
why don't you go ahead, Ethan, and then I'll introduce my students. I have a little bit to say about their projects, and then
Okay,
we can take it from there.
yeah. Hi, I'm Ethan. I use he and they pronouns. So I work with Jason and my other advisor, Becky Miller. She's the journalism and ethnomusicology professor. She is not here right now, but we have kind of a co-chair advisor situation. So this is kind of like the definition of like trans interdisciplinary. I mean, Jason works a lot with food and microbiology, and Becky works a lot with journalism and radio. So my project is, my Division III, is a radio documentary on food insecurity in the area. So throughout my kind of Hampshire career, I've been really interested in like food access and food authenticity, and what that means to each individual, and how we as like a community can kind of work on being better about food access and making sure everyone is comfortable and isn't worried about hunger. So for my project, I kind of thought about doing like a podcast. We ended up on a radio documentary about 30 minutes long. So that will be just a huge synthesis of a ton of different voices collected from audio recordings of interviews, stuff like that. And what that shows is like, you know, I have to go out a lot. I have to email people. I have to talk to everyone as much as I can, multiple interviews. Obviously, that's kind of changed now with COVID-19. So what's really interesting is that how we've been able to adapt to kind of like working on our project during the pandemic. Luckily for me, I can still kind of shift my focus, still kind of around food. So what I've decided to do with Becky and Jason is thinking about food during the pandemic and how maybe our mindsets are shifting around it. What's happening in grocery stores, what's happening at restaurants. Some are closing, some are staying open, what products are available. It's really interesting, and I'm really excited to go out and try to collect this different kind of tape. But that's kind of what a Division III is. It's not necessarily set in stone, and it is like the Division II document, very much a living document. It's something that's subject to change and grow as you learn and grow and new challenges and opportunities arise. So I'm really excited to start doing some kind of smaller, more COVID-19 focused little projects and seeing how that takes me into my second semester of Division III. I don't know if there's anything else you want me to extrapolate on, but feel free to ask me any questions, and I'll turn it over to Kim for right now.
Thanks, Ethan. So my name is Kim Chang, and I'm a faculty at Hampshire. I've been here 20 years. And one of the things I like to ask my students at the beginning of a class when they introduce themselves is to say what are the borders that they're sitting on. So I'll share with you the borders that my work sits on. It sits on the borders of psychology, anthropology, Asian American studies, and creative nonfiction writing. Just to build quickly off of what Jason said about the 3 divs at Hampshire, to me, the essence of Hampshire across all the 3 divs is the faculty-student relationship. It's what I enjoy most. It's why I'm at Hampshire. It's what drives me and keeps me going and makes it fresh all the time, no matter how many years I've been there. It's very exciting for me to work with students from the beginning of their div process. And the 3 students who come with me today have, I'm on their Div IIIs, but I've worked with them at the Div II level as well. And it's very exciting to work with students because they come with such passion. They're excited about things when they get to Hampshire, and I see my job as helping them to translate that passion into questions, really helping them to figure out what are the questions that they want to explore that's going to drive their studies. That's what we mean by inquiry-based learning. And then to help them figure out what are the tools and methods they need to pursue their questions. And as well as the forms of expression that they want to use to show what they've learned. And that could be anything from a research paper to a play, to a poem, to other forms of creative work, visual work. And one of the really cool things about Hampshire College is that we break the link between discipline and form. Whereas at many colleges, if you study a particular discipline, you're learning a certain form of expression. So for example, if you study in the sciences, you might learn how to write a scientific journal article, but we have students in the sciences at Hampshire who might produce a play. So that's I find one of the really exciting parts of Hampshire is that discipline and form can be broken apart and put together in new ways. The 3 students who are with me today are all on their Div III committees, and there's also another faculty, as Ethan mentioned, who was not able to be with us today. These 3 students are going to talk about their individual projects, but I just wanted to say some of the things that I sort of see that they have in common across their 3 projects. They're all doing transdisciplinary work, of course, and they've been doing transdisciplinary work since their Div I. They all work on the borders of either Asian American or African American studies. So they do a fair bit of history and literature over their years. They also have done some work in critical approaches to psychology and education, and particularly looking at grappling with issues of race and racism in the US. And then finally, all their work also engages with different forms of writing. And they've all done quite a bit of creative nonfiction writing, as well as poetry, fiction, memoir. So there's some things that these 3 students have in common. And they all took a course with me last fall in the first semester of their Division III, which counted as one of those advanced learning activities that Jason mentioned. And it was a course called Memory Work. And in this course, students carried out intergenerational projects. And they were intergenerational in the sense that all of these students entered these projects as second generation sort of immigrant kids who are interested in their family histories. But as we all know, family history carries both stories and silences. And so one of the really interesting parts of their memory work was figuring out how to do both research and imagination, how to engage with stories and silences, how to learn about both public histories and family stories, and to do the really difficult work of trying to excavate the past when it is often hiding from us. And so with that, I'm going to stop and let these students introduce themselves and their amazing Div III projects. I don't know what order we want to go in. Does anybody want to jump in first? I don't want to call on you. We don't do that at Hampshire.
Helen, do you want to go first?
Oh, you really did that, didn't you?
Did it?
Well, everybody else is hiding, so I guess it's my job to go first. My name is Helen. I use she and they pronouns, and my project has really kind of, I like to say it started my last semester of Div II, because I really kind of started doing a lot of the research that I needed to do for my project during my final semester of Div II in another one of Kim's classes. But my project is kind of an interrogation into my own family history. So my mother was born shortly after the Loving v. Virginia Supreme Court decision. So that Supreme Court decision made it so that it was no longer allowed. Well, sorry, let me take a breath here. It made it so that it was unconstitutional to bar Black and white people from marrying. So my mother is kind of a first generation biracial woman, and she married my father, who's a white man, but I never knew my mother's parents. So I never had access to that part of my family history. So this project really started as me wanting to kind of ask her and gain an opportunity to ask her about her family, because they passed away, that kind of makes it really difficult for her to talk about that with me. So it started as an interrogation into that part of my family history, and then it grew into a desire on my part to understand what it means for me to be kind of almost a second generation biracial Black woman living in America. And so it kind of turned into a deep introspective work. A lot of my research starting out was, I would write every day. I would read a lot of books by authors who were looking at a similar kind of complex identity that I was hoping to look at. And the unfortunate thing is there's not a lot of that work. So a large part of my div came out of a desire to write something that I would have wanted to read in high school as somebody growing up with a really complex racial identity. And so my work is really an experimental creative nonfiction work that pulls from stories from my own life, stories from my mother's life, and also from literature to kind of examine what it means to be biracial now and what it meant when my mother was growing up. I don't know who wants to go next.
Judy or Sienna?
Judy, how you feeling? Do you want to go or should I?
I think that was a you.
Me or you?
It doesn't matter. What do you want?
You go first.
Okay, yeah. My name is Judy. I use she, her pronouns. My interdisciplines are American Studies and creative writing. So Division II is 2 years, and that gave me a lot of room for exploration. And I knew something about me was drawn to language, and I just wanted to be able to grasp it. And I took a few classes in linguistics, and in those linguistic classes there was also like interdisciplinary like with a critical focus on race, but some of them it was very technical, and that was in the school when we had schools of like cognitive science, and then yeah, I worked with the writing center. Like I didn't really know starting out what I really wanted to do, but every semester I just found myself taking one of or for a while, or like every other semester, I just found myself taking a class with Will, who's the writing professor, and he just asked, he's like, Division II, you think you're studying the entire world? And then he just asked, just ask yourself, what do you want more of? And so my div right now is a combination of like creative nonfiction, fiction, prose, and poetry, along with a few visuals. And visuals is with wordplay. To try to, yeah, so it's like creative, it's trying to get you to re-see something. So confinement. So my work, even though for a really long time it's felt, you know, I really, it's April and I'm really towards the end of my div, and I've been thinking a lot about confinement. I took a class with Sienna at Smith College, and it was called Anti-Memoir. It was about Asian American autobiography and the confinements that Asian Americans, like just how to break out of confinements that are often placed on like writers of color, like, and I ran a lot into that. It was just hard, like, the white gaze with writing is something that's very different and it's very confining. And so a lot of my div I see now, maybe just within this last week, has really been trying to break out of confinement, and how do we do that? And yeah, so a lot of the content of my div is revolved around primarily like my father, and through him I kind of see like a lot is pulled out of like ideas of like citizenship, like immigration, like American masculinity, class, race, patriarchy. And so he's kind of the main focus. It is also about my family and also some interactions with like American life, in the tensions or in details with attention to like class, race, and gender. I don't say I have a so because of the 5 colleges, I was able to like, I'm still in the process of like completing a 5-college Asian American Pacific Islander certificate, and that needs like certain requirements where you have to take classes and meet requirements at all 5 colleges. So so that's that. But I told my chair, Kim, I was like, I don't think I study American studies. I don't think I study Asian American studies. I study American studies because I don't understand why Asia and America, like why can Asia never be a part of America? And so there's this really interesting idea of this like oscillating subject that goes like back and forth. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, I'm Sienna. I use she, her pronouns in my last month of Div 3. Okay, so I'll try to focus mostly on Div 3 because I'm compelled to talk about the whole experience because there's a lot of reflection going on right now. But I'll briefly do a little overview of Divs 1 and 2. So I came into Hampshire sort of a very excited psychology student, knowing I want to do psychology, knowing my future path is psychotherapy. And that hasn't changed, but the journey, like the arc of the journey has been very unique and unexpected, and where it's led me in Div 3 has been super exciting. So I started as a psychology student, and Hampshire education is kind of both like peeling the layers back on an onion while also discovering gold like every step of the way. So I suppose peeling back the layers of an onion, but also mining for gold, I suppose. So I started sort of with psychology and then realized I didn't want to do cognitive psychology, more that I was interested in this creative and critical approach to psychology. And that was sort of one turning point. And then so, you know, I'm a critical psychology student, and then I discovered psychoanalysis. I'm like, oh, I really like this. And so the interdisciplinary stuff began pretty early on in my journey. I mean, by the beginning of second year, I was like, okay, I've got a whole pool of subjects that I'm really interested in. And an amazing thing about Hampshire is the very specific, but like the very specific classes that don't feel too specific that they're like, that you wouldn't want to take them. In fact, it makes you even more passionate because, you know, what I've loved about Hampshire is that there's no Psych 101 classes, really. It's like my first semester, I took the psychology and science of emotions, which like, whoa, you know, that's a first semester seminar. So anyway, I find psychoanalysis, I find critical psychology, and then all of a sudden I find myself getting into some creative writing classes. And that's not the path I expected. As a psychology student, I thought for Div 3, okay, I'll do some sort of research. But then I discovered one of Kim's classes and I was like, oh no, I love this. So I started doing some creative writing, and that just sort of took off. And I was like, okay, this is what feels right for me. So at the beginning of Div 3, working with Kim, I sort of started, I came to this point where like, okay, I have this whole body of knowledge that I've learned the past 3 years, what to do with it now. So my project has become something I did not expect. My Div 3 is on sort of, it's an interdisciplinary and intergenerational and intersectional study on family and memory and race and Asian American identity and Christianity. Sort of the intersections between being like a second generation Indian woman and Christianity and colonialism and discovering identity and grappling with, and mental health as well plays a big role in this, and sort of grappling with these different parts of self and trying to find a way to claim them and hold them and put them together when perhaps they have been taken. So it's been a journey, and yeah, Div 3 is interesting because like you start out with all these giant ideas and all of a sudden it's April and just now I'm realizing what it is. Because you get really close to this work. I mean, it's like your baby, you know, you're holding and creating and crafting, and it's amazing to be at the end and come out with a body of work that I created that started from me as a freshman in college, just simply wanting to do psychology. So yeah, that's all I have to say for now, but if anyone has questions, please let me know.
So Melissa, should we just open up for questions now? Just people can jump
I think
in.
that's great. I do see one in the chat. Corwin asked Ethan what kind of coursework you've done through your 4 years to support your Div project.
Yeah, I saw that. Thanks for asking, Corwin. So I actually, I started off not far away from food, but I started off in agriculture, mainly about sustainable agriculture. I grew up on the North Fork of Long Island in New York. There's a lot of like wine growing there. There are some, you know, potato, pumpkin, blah, 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 but it's mainly about like agro-tourism and kind of what that was all about. So from like age 14, I was working in that industry. And you know, I was just surrounded by it, and my family worked in that industry, so I was really interested in that. So early on, I mean, when I was applying to colleges, like I wanted to do viticulture. I wanted to do like wine growing and stuff like that. Like I wanted to grow grapes. I really wanted to study that. But I quickly realized that the types of schools that were offering that kind of curriculum were not really up my alley. And when I came across Hampshire, I was blown away. So I started off kind of studying, again, like sustainable agriculture. There were plenty of classes like that. But I also started moving into stuff like social entrepreneurship, just because it seemed interesting during my Division I. And that's basically like you're looking at the capitalist model and you're trying to frame it in a way that's a little bit more beneficial for everyone instead of just benefiting a very small selection of the population. And it was really interesting to just kind of like create my own little like curriculum and kind of create my own like sustainable ventures. And so that really got me thinking about what I wanted to do. And the way I was looking at it, I started coming across like co-op models, like food co-ops. So worker owner owned, you know, operated places. And so I did a big independent study with 4 of my peers. This was like a whole semester big thing. And we talked to co-ops from across like the country, basically, just about like what they were doing, like how they were trying to make like workers happy, how they were trying to provide for the community. And so like all these overarching themes of like community-based like agriculture, community-based food programs, health disparities, wealth disparities. This kind of just started like crashing into my mind all the time. And I started thinking about that in terms of food and agriculture. And so I started, like, Jason was part of my Division II committee as well. And he'll tell you, like, I took a lot of, I think I take every food course possible. I took one with Jason, I took one with Kim. I tried to take everything relating to food. So that led me to, you know, I started with like a little bit of food chemistry, food microbiology. I did food ethnography, basically anything I could get my hands on that was food related, because there are just so many aspects to food. And so that just, I kept focusing and focusing. So from this broad thing of like agriculture, sort of, I got really into like food access. And then some health problems kind of arose for me, and I took a semester off. And during the semester off, I created a podcast. I created a short podcast to kind of occupy my time. It was called Last Meals on Death Roux. And it was kind of talking about what would you have as your last meal, and what's the significance of that? Like what kind of leads up to that? And so I created about 4.5 hours of content just talking to people about food, basically. And I realized that I really liked the audio experience and kind of that journalistic approach to food and food stories. So yeah, I ended up talking to Becky. I took a journalism class. I'm taking another journalism class right now at UMass, and it's really, really great. So I started off, it seems like very far away, but that's just kind of how it goes. You take stuff that interests you, and you kind of figure out as you go what you want to study. And I'm so lucky I ended up on like kind of a food anthropology journalism thing. What if you're unsure about what area of study you would want to come in as a freshman? That's a good question. Like I said, I took a lot, but I mean, there are a lot of classes to take, and you should take a lot. But someone else can feel that.
Yeah, would another student like to jump into the question that was just posed on chat? What if you're unsure about what area of study coming in as a freshman?
I'll say something brief on that. I feel like there's a portion of Hampshire students that come in knowing a little bit what they want to do, but there's a giant portion of Hampshire students that just have no idea. And a really special part about Hampshire is you kind of don't need to know what you want to do, because first year you will be hit with so many amazing, like rich, different topics that it's really hard not to find something to be passionate about, even in your very first semester. Because all the classes, or most of the classes you're going to take will be interdisciplinary. Therefore, you're getting a few different like topics or themes or fields of study in each class. So yeah, I think what, like, the knowledge you want to learn more about becomes pretty accessible, or you figure it out pretty early.
I'd just really like to talk about my Division I because it was kind of crazy. I took a dance class, I took a psychology class, I took a shop class, and I took a literature class because that's what I thought I was going to study. And I took all sorts of stuff. Like I really took so many different classes across the board, and that was incredible. Like I had a great time dancing. I had a great time working in the shop. Like I think as a freshman, like you really got to take everything because there's so many amazing classes to take. And, it's a super unique opportunity that, our kind of general education requirements are so, you don't have to take specific classes. You actually are encouraged to take every single kind of class that's offered. And so I was really unsure actually about what I wanted to study as a freshman. I knew I wanted to write and I wanted to read, but I didn't really know what that was going to look like. So I was like, I'm just going to do everything that I can as a freshman and hope that, through that process, I figure it out. And luckily that I did. So I really wouldn't worry too much about that at all.
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Oh no, go ahead.
I just wanted to add, like, I don't know if this has been made clear, but we are part of the 5 college system, and the opportunity to take even more classes is available to you at any time, at any point. So you can go to Amherst, UMass, Mount Holyoke, or Smith, And these are all really, really great schools. So if you cannot find something at Hampshire, chances are one of these other 4 great institutions probably has it. Or, I mean, you could be like me. I know I've done, I think 3, Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, independent studies. And so if you can't find what you're looking for, you can do it yourself, or you can do it with another peer. So the options are there. Go ahead, Judy.
So yeah, I thought I was gonna say all sorts of things as a freshman. But what I remember was second semester of first year. That was when I actually really struggled my first semester. It was just, yeah, I struggled a lot. I feel like there was a big gap in terms of learning and education. And then my second semester, I took a course with Will Ryan, the Writing Center, and I just remember a lot of like first years were taking that course, and then I was like, darn, like I really wish I would have taken that first semester because I had a lot of advice, like not a lot, but like a good amount of professors who were concerned about my writing. And second, I wanted to be a part of. So I wanted to take a speaking class because I really struggled with words, but I really wanted words. And so I emailed this professor. I was like, oh, like, I heard you got a speaking class. And then they said, oh, this is actually a part of the transformative speaking program. So I didn't know that. I just showed up to the class. So I emailed her. I showed up to the class. And then I was sitting on the doorstep in FBH. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to give up. I'm just going to walk away. Like, I'm not going to do this class. And then in that moment, Dr. G like walked in and was like, hi, are you Judy? I was like, oh, can't walk away now. So then I like went into the class, and I was kind of caught off guard because everybody had already applied and they were already, let me explain. So the class was around theories and practices in peer mentoring and speaking. And so the class is what you need to take to get training to be a TSB mentor for the school. And so I saw my classmates there, I saw my friends there, but they already got accepted for the application. And I think Dr. G, like, she kind of made an exception for me, and I filled out the application. We had an interview, and then I got the class, but like for 2 or 3 classes, like I wasn't actually in the class. And then so that was great. And I think what I remember about first year is that, the jump from being at least for me, the jump from being from a high school student to a freshman is really big. Like, even my jump from first year to second year was a lot easier because you're just used to reading, you're used to writing, used to reading these like long PDF articles with like all sorts of reading, and it's hard because they're like really long articles. And so I think what I really appreciated was the personalization, because with the Writing Center, in high school, all I really ever got was a bunch of question marks on my essays. I got a bunch of strikeouts and a bunch of question marks, and my high school teachers just didn't, it was just hard. And there was also like a big, very distinct cultural gap whenever I took like British Lit for AP4. But when I went to the Writing Center with Will, every essay that I wrote afterwards, we had a one-on-one meeting with, for at least half an hour. And he talked to me through it. And he said, the complexity of your ideas is not in the complexity or convolution of sentences, but, like, this is how it can be built, the complexity of ideas. And I really had that individualized attention. And I had that for every essay. Like, we met with him after every essay. And I feel like if I didn't have that, like, I just would not be doing this div. Like, there were many times where, I struggled in high school. And it was so competitive. High school was very competitive. I couldn't do it. There would be people in my AP4 class, which is like, are obviously like very stratified. I don't know what that word is, stratified to like with people with a certain cultural capital in AP4. And they would be like, I'm a poet, and like they did really good on AP tests and like ACTs, and like I flunked all of that. But yeah, so what Hampshire really provided for me was that individualization and also that support where like people they're trying to be helpful. They really are. They're not down your throat or anything like that. Yeah.
piggyback off of that, I came in, so in terms of the like high school to college transition, I came into college really concerned because I didn't feel like I had a grip on how to write a paper. I feel like my high school did not prepare me for college writing, and so it was of great concern. And I also took a class first semester with Will Ryan called Intro to Writing, which was definitely a turning point, one of those turning point classes that I was talking about. But also even in one of, some of my more challenging classes in this like psychology and philosophy class I was taking, where I had never done philosophy reading. I had never read empirical articles. Like, you're hit with all these new ideas and all these new forms, but your professors are so accessible. Like, my first year advisor guided me throughout. Like, we met frequently, and they become like they are there for you to utilize and develop a relationship with. And the professors are far more often than not ready and willing to take you on as an individual and to take you and your process seriously. That's one of like the best things about Hampshire is the small classes and the ability to develop those relationships that will grow into, possibly your advisors or the chairs of your Divs 2 and 3. What else was I going to say? Oh, so grades. Also, I'm sure people have questions about our written evaluations. This was also something that I was excited, but, confused about coming into Hampshire. Like, what's this eval situation going to look like? And ultimately, I think everyone in Hampshire just like loves the eval system, and grades are, what are those? I don't even know what those are. I haven't heard that word in a long time. The evals, both the evals you receive from your professor and also the process of self-evaluations that you do for each class, sometimes twice a semester. Earlier on in your Hampshire career, twice a semester, you do a mid-semester eval and a final eval, are really made to both do like a self-reflection process and sort of a self-learning process of your overall arc of the class and also where you are in your Hampshire career, because that will change. I've yet to go back into my first year evals, but I'm excited to do so once I am graduated. And so the evals you receive from your professor, individualized to the max. Like, the feedback is helpful, and it's something that builds upon itself, right? It's not just this grade where, I'm sure you guys have heard this, but a grade where it's just this letter or number that becomes really arbitrary, especially depending on whichever institutions you're going to. It's hard to compare, but at Hampshire, you are being treated as an individual with like this giant universe of like excitement for knowledge inside of you. Yeah.
Other questions from folks who are joining us today?
If nobody wants to jump in right now, I wondered earlier if it might be helpful to talk a little bit more about Div 2, maybe Kimberly or Jason or one of the students, about what the process of Div 2 is like.
I have a lot to say about Div 2 if nobody else wants to jump in.
Go for it, Helen.
I talked a little bit about how Div 1 was kind of all over the place for me, and Div 2 at the start was kind of the same way. It took me a little bit of time to figure out what exactly my Div 2 was going to be, because I actually initially thought that my Div 2 was going to be creative writing, literature, and psychology. So that was what my initial Div 2 contract was. So your Div 2 contract is similar to your Div 3 contract, and it helps you find committee members to work with. So you kind of write like, okay, this is what I'm thinking about studying, and these are the faculty that I'm potentially interested in working with. So I was really all over the place with Div 2. I didn't really have a lot of relationships with a lot of faculty going into Div 2, and I didn't really know what I was going to do. So I was like, okay, I guess I kind of like psychology. I was really interested in that. And I was really interested definitely in literature and creative writing. So I, I filled out my contract. with that information. And I emailed actually a bunch of faculty that I had never talked to before, which is actually very common when you're going into Div II. You kind of reach out to a lot of faculty who seem like they're interested in the same things that you're interested in, and you meet with them and you kind of consider like, is this a good fit? And so one of my my Div II chair, actually, I had never met her before. I had Michelle Hardesty as my Div II chair. And it actually ended up being that I didn't want to study psychology, and I changed that part of my Div II to African American studies, because I realized that psychology was not going to allow me to ask the questions that I wanted to ask. And so I actually, midway through my Division II, changed my contract, which is something that you can very easily do. You just have to talk to your committee. But you can even be unsure about what you're doing like halfway through your Div II, and that's not a huge deal at all. It's very, very common. People go in thinking that they're going to study one thing and then change little bits and pieces of their Div II along the way. That's totally fine. I'm sure I'm not alone in having done that, but it was super duper easy, and my advisors were right there with me along the way, and then they helped me prepare for Div III. And I think honestly taking a couple psychology classes really helped inform my writing, so it wasn't a total loss at all. I would not consider that brief stint into psychology a loss at all, because it helped me ask questions in a more helpful and informative way. It helped me really critically inquire into what I wanted to do. So any sort of detours along the way, I would not say were detrimental to me at all. I would say it's actually a really integral part of the journey, is those little detours along the way.
To go off that, that remind me of two things. Both that, yeah, like what you said in your Div II, even that might sometimes be unsure or like still in process. Your Div III is also, as everyone has said already, like this living work, this living being and body of work. And so like things are going to change. Things are in flux all the time, but that's part of it, right? And so that's also one of the other great things about Hampshire is honing your own ability to like hold on to these different parts of yourself, of what you're studying, of the world, and like putting them all together in a way that makes sense. Another thing that Helen said was about psychology. So that's sort of like my main field, but something that I honestly would not have learned at another school, and I've preached this to so many people, is Hampshire takes like this very critical approach to a lot of subjects that I honestly feel like you're not going to find at a lot of other schools. And that is unique to Hampshire's like values and structure and the types of professors we have, and the passions of our student body, which are not the same across the board. But in general, like at Hampshire, you are going to find students that are passionate. I know that's a word. It's like, what does that mean? But one of my favorite sort of Hampshire anecdotes is like going to a party and you'll meet new people and you'll start talking about what you study. Like that's just something that people do here. You're like, hi, I'm this person. Oh, what is in a party setting? Like people in Hampshire care about what they're doing, and it's really special to be in a place where people care so much. It's a good environment to be in. Like that's something that I'm really grateful for. All my friends and peers that I've met, even in classes, like there's, and then, the longer your Hampshire experience, the more things to share. You really do get this community feel, especially because, we're a small institution, we're a small school with not a lot of people yet, and not a lot of professors, but that tight-knit feeling is there. And you really feel like, being in Hampshire, you really feel like you're on this journey with everyone, kind of. And there's common ground wherever you go, no matter who you talk to. It's really special. And also about the 5 colleges, which Ethan mentioned earlier, like that is another one of the best things about this place. You're at this very unique institution, but just 10 to 30 minutes away in any direction, you've got 4 other schools with totally different vibes, totally different student body, totally different professors, completely accessible to us. I mean, it's like, it's been so special to me. I've only taken Smith and Mount Holyoke classes, but they've been so great, and the people are so different, and the professors are so different, and like, you know, the experience of getting grades has been different, but something that's been really valuable and fulfilling to me to sort of feel out like, oh, what's this grade thing? I forgot what this is. But you know, when you get a good grade, you're like, oh, I can still do it. And they do different things for you, right? And so, yeah, that's all I'll say for now.
Not to like pose a question for you guys. Oh wait, here's something actually. But I was thinking about talking about CEL a little bit, and just and then someone can start to field this. You have 2 CEL requirements, each are 40 hours. CEL 1, which is campus engaged learning. So that's really encouraging you to like kind of get to know everyone and kind of learn what's going on campus. And you can get these hours, they're like community service hours almost, in so many different ways. Some events will offer them, some clubs may offer them. Sometimes Division IIIs will kind of like have projects, and if they need volunteers, then you can get CEL hours out of that. I was so like shocked at like the amount of stuff you could do, but only in hindsight. Like I wish I had more like time to like kind of develop a love for like CEL. So definitely like be open to anything that's there, because it really is all fun and interesting and informative. And then CEL 2, which happens during your Division 2, is again another 40-hour requirement. That's about, it's called community engaged learning. And this is starting to like move off of campus a little bit, start to get to know the town of Amherst, maybe kind of Hampshire County as a whole. You can do internships, basically any kind of like project or, you know, kind of community service requirement would start to fill that out. And that's something where you have even more freedom to just like explore really anything. So what I did, this was like a 3-year project I did just in my hometown about like advocating for bus shelters, because there was just no bus shelters in my town, so we really needed them. And that actually fulfilled my CEL 2 requirement. And that's just like a big community project I worked on that probably had, I don't know, like 600 or 700 hours. So you can definitely go over and you can definitely do more than just like what's listed on this site. So even if no one's really wondering about it, look more into CEL. It really is beneficial, and it's there to help you and to kind of network a little bit. I don't know what this question is. When the Div III gets initially defined, I think Sienna said it best, where it's, who knows, like at April, you know, like
it's pretty individual. For some people it is at the beginning of at the beginning of Div III, or even the end of Div II, which sometimes blend into each other as well. For some people, first semester of Div III is spent sort of like doing that excavation work of figuring out exactly, you know, doing some writing, but also still forming. And then second semester, you just dive in with like your writing or your research or your crafting, or depending on whatever form you're using.
But logistically, it does initially get defined when you're doing your Div III contract.
Yes.
When you're asking for faculty to be on your Div III committee, you do kind of have to let them know what you're thinking of doing. And that doesn't need to necessarily be like, I know I'm going to do this, 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 and this thing, and this is what my outline is. It does not need to be anything like that at all. It just needs to be something like, these are some of the questions I'm hoping to explore, and these are what disciplines I'm probably going to involve in this study. Like, it's really just kind of like a broad strokes idea about what you're thinking of doing, just so that faculty who may be interested in being on your committee, or who you may be interested in having on your committee, know what they're getting into. But then kind of as Sienna and Ethan said, it really is different for everybody when you're kind of really firming up what that is. Like some people don't even really know what it is until the end.
And you get multiple chances to edit that contract as well.
The process for forming your Div III committee actually starts in the last semester of Div II, where you as Helen was saying, you start to craft some questions, start to identify some possible projects for yourself. And then you put together a list of faculty who you might want to work with, and you start meeting with them. So you start a conversation around Div 3 during your last semester of Div 2, and then you file the contract at the beginning of the fall. And like all contracts at Hampshire, it evolves and changes as you get more focused. And inevitably that's what happens, is your Div 3 starts like this, and it gradually gets more and more focused, so that by the end of where these guys are right now, it's very clear what the project is, and it's taking a very specific shape. But it starts in Div 2. It probably starts even early. I know students who come to Hampshire sometimes saying, this is what I want to do for Div 3. And in some cases, it actually, they come back to that initial idea. In other cases, it's completely transformed. So some of you may already have ideas in your mind about some big project.
I had two things in mind. One of them was about Div 3. So for my personal process, so for the fall semester, I took Kim's class, and it was, I felt like this is official, like this is for Div 3, but Kim had a lot of shorter writing prompts that were very helpful in like getting unstuck and just helping you realize what kind of material you would like to work on. My process for Div 3 is like in terms of like exponential growth, it's like from third semester, like fall semester to spring, it was like very like pretty like, yeah. And then from spring to fall, it was like pretty like, yeah, so it goes up. But then the best way I could describe it as this semester of Div during my last semester is that I feel like as like time gets more and more condensed as I'm going through Div 3, and it's getting like tighter, it's getting more condensed, but it also kind of blows my mind because I don't want to say that I don't necessarily think that my writing is getting better, but I think that I am able to do things that I wasn't able to do before. And that has like, what do I try to say? Like that is, even within weeks, like from a month to another month, the growth is like very like, so it's kind of like, yeah, I don't know if I'm like capturing time and space and whatever, right? Another thing I wanted to say about Hampshire, in Division 2, I took a lot of classes in the 5 colleges. I was too scared to explore my first year, and I was like, I don't know how to fill out this form. It's really easy. So I've taken colleges at all 5 colleges, and it was great. Like there's not a lot of Asian Americans at Hampshire, and so when I took classes at Mount Holyoke and Smith, that really like helped. And when I went there, like their buildings are so they're big and they're grand and they're beautiful, and like their professors were also like top notch. So like UMass, Mount Holyoke, Smith, and Amherst, and yeah, I just got so much out of it. But also, like I do have to say, I always appreciated that I came home to Hampshire. There was last semester during spring, I took 2 classes at Smith, 1 at Mount Holyoke. And it was great because I needed to get off campus, but I was also always so happy to come home. And that's because like overwhelmingly, and this is just my bias because I go here, but there are some really, really perceptive and selfless people at Hampshire. Like the most, like I've never met like so many like unique and selfless and like driven, community driven people. And I know that like a lot of, as students and as young adults, like we're all doing a lot, we're all invested in a lot of projects, but my bias is like I haven't seen like, okay, just traditional student, maybe I'm assuming like 18 to 22. I don't know that many young people in terms of what I've seen that are so committed to so many different things just for the sake of like their vision, or just for the sake of community, or for creating something. And so I see a lot of Hampshire students like we're passionate about so much, and so like we're very spread and thinned out a lot, and a lot of that is just like towards the common good. Yeah.
Well, it's 12 o'clock. Does anybody have any last questions? Or Kim or Jason, do you want to share a closing thought?
I have one last brief point. I really encourage people to get into clubs and like find like clubs, CEL activities, sports if you want, like create your own, think about creating your own club, get into that process at the beginning, because that's something I wish I had done sooner. Yeah, so I highly encourage that during the club fair. That always happens.
Also,
Yeah,
being a designer for a club can count for CEL too. That's important to note.
Yeah.
I think
And sometimes you'll find something you didn't expect. I did stand-up comedy and I ended up loving it.
I think my final thought, I mean, really building off of everything the students have talked about, I mean, the theme really running through a lot of that is connection and what was just mentioned. Was really forming relationships and connections, students and faculty, and staff. Staff are a really important part and contribute a lot to the student learning. At Hampshire College, they're much more integrated in the academic program than there are at many other colleges and universities. You know, so just my parting words are, you know, my advice usually to my first year students when they come to Hampshire College, is make a friend. That's probably one of the most important things you can do to ensure that you're going to enjoy your experience and stay in college, and get to know a faculty member really well, at least one. Hopefully a lot more than one, but get to know one, at least one, and, you know, get comfortable going to their offices and talking to them and getting advice. And when you begin to form those connections, Hampshire College is really just an incredible place for me to work and for students to learn and for all of us to learn together. So, you know, I really appreciate you taking the time to be on this, this new format we're doing out of necessity. And I'm even enjoying this experience and forming these connections as well, even though we're all very far apart right now. So thank you.
And I would just add, I know this is a really tough time to be making decisions about college, as it is for everything, but I think it's a particularly hard time to have to figure out those college decisions. And I think, I mean, one thing that I'm noticing is that, you know, I mentioned earlier, I really think the essence of Hampshire is the faculty-student relationships. That's what makes the whole Div system work. I'm happy to say that I feel like since the COVID crisis and since we've all gone remote, I don't feel like that's changed. I feel like the essence of what we do is because it's so person to person, we can't physically be in the same room. I had a 2-hour-long Div 2 meeting with Sienna yesterday. So, you know, I think this says something about what we do, in spite of the technology.
Well, I just wanted to say, Sienna, Helen, Ethan, Judy, it was a total joy to hear about your work. And I, like everyone else, wish we were on campus celebrating with you this spring. But I know that we will be together to celebrate again soon. And I hope you all know too that the alumni community is out there for you in your next steps too. So I just thought I'd say that while we're all here, and thank you so much for sharing your work and your stories with us. And thanks everyone for joining and talking with us today. There are more Accepted Student Day events, including sessions on the academic program, on a student Q&A with current students, session with our president, Ed Wingenbach, and one on like student life and outside the classroom activities too. So you can see all of those online. Either join one or you can watch the recordings afterward. Okay. Thanks everyone. Take care.
Thank you.